For decades, Western governments, corporate news media, and Hollywood have deceived the public to manufacture consent for war.
There isn't any debate about it.
Fought in the name of freedom, human rights, and democracy, American wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya have wrought death, mass destruction, and slavery. With those catastrophes ongoing, selling the next war demanded deeper cynicism and faux humanitarianism than ever before, and as entertainment and information become indistinguishable, war propaganda grows more sophisticated. Hollywood's role in promoting war is nothing new. The American film industry has collaborated with the State Department, the Pentagon, and intelligence agencies to produce numerous films burnishing the military's image, revising controversial historical episodes, and propagating official accounts of critical events. As the US role in destabilizing Syria expanded, so too did the number of documentaries produced on the crisis. This video will examine what is perhaps the most ambitious of them all, Cries from Syria. Produced by HBO, debuted at the prestigious Sundance Film Festival, and now available on Netflix, Cries from Syria was widely promoted in numerous Western media outlets and even screened in the International Court of Justice. It has been promoted by public figures from the neoconservative Nikki Haley, who as US ambassador to the United Nations has agitated for regime change from Syria to Iran, to recently deceased rock musician Chris Cornell, who included footage from the film in his final music video before he committed suicide. Pop diva Cher even composed an original song for the film.
For this world, bring winter, it sails, it's gone off the rails, and we got to save it.
Cries from Syria depicts President Bashar al-Assad as a genocidal dictator exterminating his own people.
We have been living under dictatorship for 40 years.
حملة إبادة جماعية بكل ما تعنيه الكلمة لسكان حلب المدنيين.
According to the human rights group Amnesty International, the Syrian government has committed war crimes. Indeed, the Syrian state has tortured and disappeared political prisoners, and in years past maintained a rendition program with the United States. But the accusation of a Syrian genocide against Sunni Muslims is false. Sunnis make up for 3/4 of the Syrian population and more than half of the army's ranks. Advancing the trope of a systematic Sunni genocide, Cries from Syria deceptively edited a speech Assad gave to falsely portray him as having called Syrians germs.
تتكاثر في كل لحظة وفي كل مكان ولا يمكن إبادتها.
The head of the regime, he started to call us, the Syrian people, as germs and bacteria, and he wants to dispose us.
In reality, Assad was comparing conspiracies to germs. Here is the unedited section of that speech.
فالمؤامرات كالجراثيم تتكاثر في كل لحظة وفي كل مكان ولا يمكن إبادتها وإنما يمكن العمل على تقوية المناعة في أجسادنا لصدها.
The opening scene of Cries from Syria depicts Aylan Kurdi, the little boy whose image was seen across the world, his tiny and lifeless body washed up on a Turkish beach after he and his family drowned in the Mediterranean Sea. But Aylan and his family were not fleeing Bashar al-Assad, as Cries from Syria implies. In reality, the Kurdis were fleeing an ISIS assault on their hometown of Kobani. Meanwhile, the Syrian government has been the leading force fighting the Islamic State in Syria. This sort of deception characterizes much of Cries from Syria, but it is an effective tactic in the campaign to convince Americans that their bombs are humanitarian, and that toppling Syria's government would actually benefit its people.
ما تعادل جرائم داعش في سوريا ما تعادل 2% من جرائم الأسد، يعني 98% أخذها جرائم النظام، أي الإرهاب الأول هو النظام.
Aylan's aunt, Tima Kurdi, who Aylan and his family were trying to reach in Canada, pointed out a reality at odds with the narrative of Cries from Syria. The Syrian refugee crisis is chiefly the product of a regime change war waged by the United States and its allies.
I would hope that President Trump to stop supporting regime change in Syria.
Another claim Cries from Syria makes is that the Syrian government is responsible for virtually all casualties in the conflict. To be sure, Millions of people have fled their homes, and hundreds of thousands of mostly civilians have been killed in both opposition and government-held areas. But casualty figures are virtually impossible to verify, especially in opposition-held areas where journalists and human rights workers can be kidnapped and killed. Available figures are so unreliable that the United Nations stopped counting casualties in 2013. By baselessly attributing nearly all casualties to the Syrian government, Cries from Syria whitewashes the role of the jihadist militias that dominate the armed opposition, the Islamic State, and what US diplomat Brett McGurk says has become the largest Al-Qaeda franchise in the world, Jabhat al-Nusra, which is cynically whitewashed as a mere Islamic militia in Cries from Syria.
Jabhat al-Nusra Front is an Islamic militia.
One of the primary deceptions in Cries from Syria is in its portrayal of the Free Syrian Army simply as defenders of ordinary citizens against the murderous Syrian government. In reality, the Free Syrian Army was an empty brand adopted by numerous and disparate groups armed and funded by the CIA after vetting as so-called moderate rebels. Much of those arms ended up in the hands of Islamic extremists. Pro-opposition analyst Sam Heller described the FSA as a weapons farm for larger Islamist and jihadist factions, including Syria's Al-Qaeda affiliate. On many occasions, the CIA-backed Free Syrian Army has collaborated with jihadist militias. FSA groups have battled government forces alongside both Jabhat al-Nusra and ISIS, and many Free Syrian Army fighters joined Jabhat al-Nusra's ranks. Cries from Syria portrays this collaboration in a positive light.
كان ما في أي مشاكل بينه وبين الجيش السوري الحر وكان يقاتلوا مع بعضهم على الجبهات.
One of the film's heroes is Colonel Riyad al-Assad, the Syrian army defector who founded the so-called Free Syrian Army.
أنا صاحب حق. أنا صاحب قضية. أنا مطلب إنساني.
In this video, Riyad al-Assad explains the cozy relationship between the Free Syrian Army and Jabhat al-Nusra, the Syrian Al-Qaeda affiliate.
جبهة النصرة هن إخوانا وإن إلى الآن أثبتوا جدارتهم في القتال في معاملتهم مع الناس معاملة طيبة جدا إلى الآن لم يسيئوا إلى أي شخص على العكس تماما ممكن بعض الأفكار يكون في خلاف بعض الأمور ولكن إلى الآن أنا بقول لك أغلب الناس اتجهت باتجاه جبهة النصرة.
This is Abdel Basit al-Sarut, a one-time soccer star who is portrayed as an icon in the Syrian uprising. Sarut is from Homs, the city that was often called the capital of the revolution. In 2014, Al Jazeera reported that Sarut pledged allegiance to the Islamic State.
يطرق حارس الثورة باب أكثر التنظيمات تشدداً، وتتناقل الأنباء خبر مبايعته وولائه لتنظيم الدولة الإسلامية.
إن شاء الله راح تشوفون عبد الباسط بالأيام اللي جاي خطوة جديدة بالثورة السورية، خطوة جديدة أتوقع أنها تكون هي الخطوة الصح يعني راح أكون بمحل ثاني.
Here he is seen bearing its flag. In this video, Sarut chants in support of wiping out the Alawite sect, the religious minority which President Assad belongs to. Despite his extremism, Sarut was the central figure and protagonist in the film Return to Homs. Hadi al-Abdullah is depicted as an intrepid reporter who braved Assad's bombs to deliver the truth. But Abdullah regularly embedded with jihadist groups, acting as their propagandist.
نحن الآن بفضل الله داخل معسكر المسطومة المحرر على أيدي أبطال جيش الفتح جند الأقصى وجيش السنة.
Despite his affinity for the local franchise of the organization that carried out the 9/11 attacks, the New York Times published a glowing profile of Abdullah. He went on to win the Reporters Without Borders Journalist of the Year award, earning him a congratulatory tweet by the now defunct US Embassy in Syria. Here, Hadi al-Abdullah interviews 7-year-old Bana al-Abed, a child who is exploited in what is perhaps the most cynical ploy in the regime change propaganda effort. In September 2016, as the Syrian army prepared to liberate Aleppo from the occupying jihadist militias, A Twitter account, supposedly run by Bana with the help of her mother, appeared and quickly gained hundreds of thousands of followers. Bana's followers fixated on her daily life, some even to the point of perversion. But her tweets and videos were not typical of a 7-year-old child. The account praised US airstrikes and even called for World War III. On video, it was apparent that she had little grasp of the English language. Nonetheless, Bana and her Twitter account became a fixture in Western media coverage of Syria. CNN interviewed Bana in what appears to be a scripted interaction.
What is your message to President Assad?
I am very sad. A lot of died and no one helped them. The world is watching. The world doesn't do anything.
The Washington Post branded her the Anne Frank of Syria, and CNN's Jake Tapper promoted the 7-year-old as an authoritative expert on the conflict. Time magazine deemed Bana's account the 4th most influential in the world. In December 2016, the Syrian army and its allies defeated the jihadist militias where Bana lived in Aleppo. Her mother, Fatima, tweeted that Bana had been killed, and minutes later, the tweet was revealed to be false. The Syrian government had arranged for militants and their families who refused reconciliation to take buses to be relocated to Idlib province in northern Syria. While Western media outlets wondered why Bana's account had gone silent, she soon reappeared in the Al-Qaeda dominated enclave. Bana then went to neighboring Turkey, where she received citizenship from President Erdogan. There, she met Lindsay Lohan, the former child star who converted to Islam after rehabilitation from years of drug and alcohol abuse. While in Turkey, Bana appeared on state media outlet TRT for an unscripted interview. She had little, if any, understanding of the English language. Here we see Bana's mother instructing her what to say.
Do you like the food in Istanbul?
Yes.
What do you like?
Save the children of Syria.
Yeah. Do you like Istanbul?
Fish.
You like fish?
Yes.
Yeah.
At 8 years old, Bana was awarded a lucrative book deal with publishing giant Simon & Schuster. In March 2018, she appeared at the Oscars awards ceremony in Hollywood. And in July, Bana returned to Turkey and was featured in a commercial for the country's largest cell phone provider, this time speaking fluent Turkish.
Merhaba Türkiye. Bana.
On May 19, 2017, I attended a screening at the United States Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Democratic Congressman Brendan Boyle and Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger sponsored the event, together embodying the bipartisan campaign for regime change.
When it comes to things like this, we put our partisan stripes aside.
Both Boyle and Kinzinger have raked in campaign donations from the Free Syria Public Action Committee, the Israel Lobby, and weapons manufacturers like Boeing and Lockheed Martin.
So to defeat terrorism, I think we have to defeat Bashar al-Assad.
Kenan Rahmani from the Syria Campaign introduced the film. The Syria Campaign is a London and New York-based public relations firm that lobbies for increased military action and economic sanctions on Syria, like the sanctions which caused the deaths of more than 500,000 children in Iraq. The Syria Campaign's funding comes from oil tycoon Ayman Asfari, while other donors are anonymous.
They're looking for us to put economic sanctions and other measures on those who perpetrate atrocities in Syria, like the Assad regime, like the Russians and the Iranians that are backing him.
Following the screening, TV commentator Essie Cupp moderated a panel. Cupp has used her primetime slots on CNN and HLN to advocate for a full U.S. invasion of Syria.
Isn't it time to do something in a full-throated way.
The panel featured the Oscar-nominated director of Cries from Syria, Yevgeny Afanevsky, Middle East Institute Senior Fellow Charles Lister, Syrian-American Noura Bari, and Dr. Samir Attar. Attar represented the Syrian-American Medical Society, which operates in Al-Qaeda-controlled territory and lobbies for regime change. He had made multiple visits to Al-Qaeda-controlled areas of eastern Aleppo. He wrote about these experiences in op-eds for the New York Times, Time Magazine, Wall Street Journal, and Washington Post, calling for the US to attack Russia and implement a no-fly zone. This is what Joint Chief of Staff Chair General Joseph Dunford said would amount to a hot war with Russia.
Right now, Senator, for us to control all of the airspace in Syria would require us to go to war against Syria and Russia.
Event host Essie Cupp, along with Noura Bari and a Reagan administration official, ran a now defunct group called Help Me Go Home, which lobbied for so-called safe zones. Time and time again, safe zones have failed to live up to their name. Instead, they've precipitated massacres in Iraq, Bosnia, and Rwanda, among other instances. Bari appeared in what seems to be a staged interaction during a televised town hall in 2015 with then-presidential candidate Jeb Bush. She urged Bush to implement a no-fly zone against Russia and Syria.
Are we going to let Putin run this world? So I would like to know your views on a no-fly zone.
Well, first of all, my heart goes out to your family, and I applaud the fact that you're acting on your heart to take care of them.
Bush immediately began to refer to the interaction in media appearances.
I was at a town hall meeting last night, and a woman named Nora, with tears in her eyes and quivering voice.
He also promoted Bari on his social media platforms, and multiple articles about the interaction appeared in mass media. Soon after, Bari was interviewed on CNN to promote Jeb Bush and to urge U.S. military confrontation against Russia, never disclosing her ties to CNN's very own Essie Cupp.
Governor Bush has outlined a strategy to enforce a no-fly zone. The Syrian American community we're all behind Governor Bush. He knows what's going on, and we're rooting for him, and we'll be behind him to get him elected.
Finally, Bari appeared in a promotional video for the Bush campaign.
He just nailed it, the issue on the head. He knows what's going on in Syria, and he answered the question directly, and it was exactly what I wanted to hear.
We need to be part of the strategy to deal with taking Assad out and taking ISIS out.
I emailed him just to send him like daily "Go Jeff Go" kind of notes, and just cheering him on and sending him really good wishes every single day.
With Trump in the White House, Bari continued to appear as a guest on Essie Cupp's show, spinning wild tales and demanding Trump wipe out the Syrian military.
When I'm hearing about mothers watching their children eat their own feces because they're starving, this is not a civilized world. It's time to take action and ground Assad's air force.
Charles Lister represented the Middle East Institute, a Washington, D.C.-based think tank funded by oil companies, weapons manufacturers, investment banks, and construction tycoons, all of which would profit from the collapse of the Syrian state. It has also reaped tens of millions in funding from U.S.-allied Gulf states like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, theocratic monarchies that have sponsored and armed competing extremist groups. Before his audience in the U.S. Capitol, Lister portrayed Al-Qaeda as a popular movement with broad support in Syria.
Al-Qaeda has really got it right, I hate to say.
He then went on to claim Al-Qaeda is more moderate than ISIS, despite the fact that the two groups share the same genocidal ideology.
Although they've become more aggressive and more hardline over time, they are still very distinctly different to ISIS. Their strategy is so much more effective on the ground. They are winning hearts and minds.
This video, from Al-Qaeda-controlled Idlib province in northern Syria, depicts a summary execution of a woman accused of adultery. It is an example of the style of rule imposed by the jihadist group Lister whitewashed in the U.S. Capitol. After praising Al-Qaeda, Lister suggested the U.S. could assassinate Bashar al-Assad with zero consequences.
If we really wanted to tomorrow, we could bomb the presidential palace and kill Bashar al-Assad and it would be done with.
SC Cup closed the panel with a stunning admission, saying that their goal is to manufacture public support for war.
To get to a place where we can talk about those options as policy, we have to get public opinion to a place where it is demanded.
Director Yevgeny Afanivsky was also on hand at the congressional event. His previous films include the widely seen Netflix documentary Winter on Fire, a pro-NATO public relations vehicle that promoted the 2014 US-backed coup in Ukraine and whitewashed the role of neo-Nazis and fascist nationalists, just as he did for jihadists in Cries from Syria. Afanivsky also directed the comedy film Oy Vey, My Son is Gay. Following the panel, I asked Afanivsky about the editorial decisions behind Cries from Syria.
You featured Hadi Abdullah prominently in the film, and he was kind of portrayed as a fearless and brave reporter. There are some controversial videos of him. I can show it to you. It's definitely him.
No, it is Hadi, yes.
سوريا الشام بإذن الله سنحررها من رجس النصيرية بإذن الله وستبقى سوريا سنية. سوريا سنية لا شيعية.
I'm maybe sound defensive again towards you, but Hadi doing his job as the reporter.
This is also Hadi, and you can't hear it as well, but there are Syrian soldiers in here he's laughing at as they die.
فقتل ما يقارب 14 جندي من جنود الأسد والعصابات الإيرانية التي كانت متحصنة فيها.
يا عسكري علي صوتك.
يا عسكري علي صوتك. شو نفعكم بشار الأسد؟
علي صوتك.
عيد.
I also asked him about his portrayal of the White Helmets, the so-called civil defense group that has been filmed partaking in summary executions with Al-Qaeda fighters.
There is a group of people who give us hope. We call them the White Helmet.
There are videos of White Helmets taking part in summary executions. It's not only Hadi Abdullah.
Again, White Helmets.
The White Helmets taking part in summary executions where they take a man, shoot him in the head, and then the White Helmets put him on and carry him off.
That's fucking bullshit.
Just days before the screening, a video surfaced of another execution the White Helmets had participated in.
That's fake. Do you know that it's White Helmets or somebody that put it their costume in order to create this fake video?
During the screening, the White Helmets released an apology, confirming their members' involvement in the execution. Afanivsky remained incredulous and lashed out.
People like working for Sputnik these days also accusing White Helmets in doing something like this, and they're working openly for Sputnik, who is the Russian source. So what you're doing right now, you're creating literally propaganda against people who are saving somebody's lives.
Until now, mainstream media has been able to whip up public fervor to support military misadventures packaged as humanitarian interventions. But as the public becomes distrustful of mainstream media, this approach has diminishing returns.
There's been a fundamental undermining, I think, of the aspirations, the hope there was in the 1990s that the media was able to enable humanitarian action to protect human rights. That has been very much lost in a new reality where humanitarianism has almost become a propaganda tool for Western governments.
I want you to know that after our panel, which I hope you stay for, there is a reception with plenty of alcohol.
You're just a walking taint, the opposite of saint. At least Hitler could paint. You're a monster and a volleyball fan, but more than that, you're an asshole. You're an asshole. Who's afraid of his mum? You're a murdering, mum-fearing asshole.